our September Ask Me Anything series with Coach.me and our special guests. I'm delighted today to have the founder and chairman of Coach.me and someone that's become an incredible friend, Tony Stubblebine. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm back. I love it. Thank you, Kendra. I'm glad to be here. Um, uh, yeah, I love that. I love everything about what we're doing here. So let's get into it.
Let's do. Okay, so and it's funny how we knew some of these things, but some of it is happening on the fly. August was the 10-year anniversary of the founding of the company that is Coach.me. Can you tell us a little bit more about our origin story? How were we born? What are some of the key evolutions that we made? What is some of the history that makes us special that's not so
Sure.
widely known?
I mean, I mean, the first thing is, I mean, we started in habits, not in coaching. So I had this idea on my own that I wanted some like positive reinforcement system that could shape, just fix myself. I think a lot of companies get founded to scratch the itch of the founder, and for me, I was just like, why am I so messy? Like in every way. It just, my habits are bad. I'm sloppy. Things don't get done. And like a lot of people, I thought, um, you know, I thought I was down on myself. Like a lot of people get down on themselves when they see their imperfections, and I thought, well, why don't I like polish some of those imperfections and get sharper about how to be an adult? And so I started playing with positive reinforcement systems. I built this prototype for myself, and it changed my life instantly. It was like just a little bit of positive reinforcement, like just shaped my behavior in a way I've never had that opportunity before. And um and so I wondered if I could turn this into a company, because I was running a business at that point, but it didn't feel on mission for me. It felt like it was just a business, and I didn't have the passion for it that I thought maybe I could have if I was running something different. So I took this idea for a positive reinforcement system, basically, to a friend of mine, actually my old boss, Evan Williams, who's a tech luminary in some way because he had founded Blogger, he had founded Twitter, and he had just left Twitter at that point. And I said, uh, um, "Hey, do you have any advice?" He's like, "Yeah, my advice is we should work together on this." And so he funded the beginning of it and helped co-design the first version of the habit tracker. That's not too different from the habit tracking that's in the system right now, and I was on the board, and just like super helpful. And I mean, just to give you an example, we've had a lot of support from real luminaries in the industry, like Tim Ferriss and David Allen. And I remember this one story with Ev where we were at a baseball game together, and he was asking me what angel investors I wanted, and he goes, "Think big." I was like, "Fine, I want Oprah." He goes, "Okay, I can't do Oprah. What's your number two?" I was like, "Fine, I want Tony Robbins." And so Ev took his phone out and he sent a direct message to Tony Robbins, and he said, "Hi, Tony," or whoever runs Tony's Twitter account. "I've got this business thing. It might be an interesting thing for you. Do you want to talk?" And like 10 minutes later, we get this direct message back from Tony Robbins. "Hey, this is Tony. I run my own Twitter account, and yeah, I'd be up for meeting." And like, so those doors really got opened because Ev was involved, and we did a lot of life changing work in habit tracking. Like now, habit tracking is a category of app on the App Store. Like there's dozens of good habit trackers. Still think we have the best take on it, but there's dozens of good ones. And I think that's because we showed the power of habit tracking. But in the end, maybe I just get antsy sometimes, but it kind of, there was a transition from habit tracking to coaching. And the thing that was kind of driving that for me, there's some business reasons, but the main thing that was driving it is I just felt like habit tracking wasn't enough. And it's because people are so complicated. and there's so many things that can get in the way. The only thing that's ever going to actually work for people is coaching, and that was my love of coaching. That thought, okay, well, we can take what we learned in habits and turn and find something new and original to do in coaching, which we did. I mean, we made coaching accessible in a way that it's never been accessible before. We brought it to tens of thousands of people that never would have considered hiring a coach. Invented a new form of coaching. I mean, we did a lot of really good work there, and that's the part of the journey, Kendra, that you were like really deeply involved with. So that's the history, basically.
I love it. I knew some of those stories, but not all of the detail, and I don't think we've really shared that enough in recent history. I've
Yeah.
even had coaches ask as recently as a couple months ago, why do you guys care so much about habits? Why can't I
Yeah.
just go do, X type of coaching? And I think, we were all habit nerds, from the get go. That
Yeah.
was our founding DNA.
Yeah. Um, it is, but it goes back. I think this company has a practicality about it too, where like we really want to see results, and so habits are such an interesting entry point for coaching because they let more people be coaches because they kind of shrink the problem space down a little bit. They get out of the realm of theoreticals. I mean, they just like the thing that a habit goal does so quickly for a client is it puts them into the world of action, and you see immediately what are the hurdles for getting those actions done, and that gives you something real to talk about in coaching sessions. um, and and then yeah too, it's like I mean, the last, as I said before, it lets us coach people that otherwise didn't consider coaching because it has such a clear goal attached to it. I think this is one of the things that's sometimes hard for people to wrap their head around. It's like, what will I get out of a coach, or what will I get out of therapy? And when you can like really spell it out clearly, it makes more sense to people. So um, I mean, obviously we started it with habits because we were already habit nerds, but then we found a lot to love about this approach.
I love what you said about it gets us out of theoretical, because I think
Yeah.
even in the most high end leadership coaching, that I've done with CEOs or with founders or
Yeah.
with, at what other folks might consider, a premier level of coaching,
Right.
it's right back to the habits. Exactly what we're working on with them is,
Yeah.
what are your habits for leading meetings, preparing for meetings, interacting with your team? Are you doing your
Yeah.
weekly review? It really, as you said, it gets us out of the theoretical into the action. And you can unpack a lot of things through that lens. It
Yeah.
isn't that
Yeah.
we don't explore, the more emotional side of things or the soft skills, so to speak. But it's through the lens of that action. I think it's really
Oh, I
powerful.
mean, completely. It's like the these actions fail because you run into a person's hidden belief systems and hidden identity systems, and so that's when you get to address them in such a more fruitful context because the client is really clear, oh, something is getting in the way, and they know that they're going to get a payoff for addressing them in the moment. um, yeah, it's been a great framing, and I think this even for traditional coaching. I find in myself, I have this doubt if it's too high level, if it's presented as too high level. I i know that stuff and has been the most powerful changes in my life, but I like I find, even with all the experience I have, I still sometimes doubt, like, oh, is this really going to be useful? And so um, to bring it down to a more practical level for people, I think removes that doubt. I mean, if I still feel that doubt, then most people are feeling that doubt, right? So just tell people, like, hey, let's do something real together, and you can be the one as a coach that has that certainty and that confidence that you're going to run into, the big deep issues that really are transformative.
That's a great point. In our habit coaching certification program that we're in the middle right now, we just did a week ago the open gates model, which is what you described of making sure that all of those gates are open. And the point that you made about doing it in context is so very, very important. You almost can't even assess in the right context, because we all, I think we're really poor predictors of what's getting in the way of if we're not doing something. Our
Yeah,
hypothesis about why we're not doing something is probably not accurate, and it isn't until we try that we really get that
yeah,
information.
yeah,
We've got some great comments coming in from participants. Ramon adding that we fantasize that it's something else, right? But everything boils down to our habits, and Valentina adding, no matter what level the coaching is at, the change is what we're seeking. Great points. It's good.
exactly.
All right, so I can't let you go, or let us go too far in the conversation without talking about the transition to a certain degree that both of us have made recently. But
Wow.
let's talk about yours. So tell us what you're doing now, and how that came about.
Well, I mean, I'm shocked by it still. The short is that I took over as the CEO of Medium, which is a huge publishing platform, and the business is kind of a curated selection of the best of Medium, and that people subscribe to. And I mean, I I got into Medium, I guess, because I had started in publishing. Actually, my first, and Kendra, you're the person who helped actually connect it for me, that it's all very similar. My first real, like, serious job was working for this technical publisher, O'Reilly Media, and we published books to help people learn to program. And the connection to coaching is like we're just leveling people up in a lot of different ways. And so I had seen, before I got into habit tracking and coaching, I'd seen the ways that writing can help level people up. And I'd always been a writer, and writing helps me think. I think I'm a very intuitive thinker, and that makes communication hard for me. And so I have to like take some intuition and force it onto the page. And then that's then articulated, and I can share it with other people. So when Medium launched, also 10 years ago in August, I was one of the first authors. Evan Williams, who helped me start Lyft and Coach Me, he's the founder of Medium. So it's sort of, we were starting companies at the same time, and to some degree I was involved in it. And then I started a publication there, Better Humans, which for a long time was actually just a group blog for Coach Me. Like, the coaches would write there. And as Medium kind of figured out its business model, we ended up being their first partner and one of their biggest publications. I started two more publications there, all various ways to help people achieve their goals. So one on marketing, which is help entrepreneurial people achieve their goals. One on programming, which goes back to my O'Reilly experience. And uh, and it got to the point that I think 1% of Medium traffic was going through a publication that I run. So we were really significant partners, and also close advisors to the founder. And he was ready to move on. I mean, he's been doing it for 10 years. And in a way, these are sort of parallels. It's like, um, uh, they call me like the ultimate power user. And like, Kendra, you're Coach Demi's ultimate power user. And so, like, the Ev's relationship to me is my relationship to you. And I saw a lot of parallels as we went through this transition, where it felt like, at some level, I felt like, I put a ton into Coach Demi, and I'm not sure what else like I have to give. and then here, like, you had picked up and could see like kind of a new energy for it, and knew what was good about it so deeply because you'd been part of it. And the same for Medium. It's like, um, I knew what was great about Medium, and I knew, had a really strong opinion on that. And when Ev was looking to leave, I raised my hand. I don't know if like this is maybe too much backstory, but I had told him when I raised my hand, actually, it was a little harder than I thought it would be because he'd recruited me into the company like 2 years before. Like, just come, people will like you. I don't know what your job is going to be. And I just really didn't want that like middle management job there. And so what I had told him, kind of hyperbolically, but to just make it be so that I wasn't turning him down, I said, Ev, like, I think I've gone feral. Like, you're never going to catch me in an office again. Because I mean, I was running this company that was very like, I loved everything. Like, I loved everything about Coach Sami, and the how much I got to learn and how much I didn't have to deal with sort of the bureaucracy of a business. And so I told him this thing, and he'd really taken it to heart. And so when I said I wanted to be the CEO, he was like, I thought you were never going to be in an office again. And said, well, if the opportunity is big enough. And so for me, the Medium opportunity is like so big. It's another way to reach people, help them level up. I think at a scale that's just really, really big. Um, and it's in a way, it's a chance to challenge myself in a new way. That I spent 10 years at Coach Sami, not just helping other people grow, but helping myself grow. And so I was curious what I was capable of um, in a different situation. And I mean, certainly Medium has been a huge challenge already, but that's the fun of it. Yeah,
I love it. Thank you for sharing that backstory.
yeah,
And so we've got, our audience for these is mostly coaches. So
yeah,
still wearing your Medium hat.
yeah.
Um, what advice or what direction or what thoughts would you share with coaches, kind of having the knowing the inner workings of coaching through coach.me and knowing what's going on with Medium. If you could provide coaches, in this environment today, some
Yeah.
advice on those platforms and tools, what would you share?
I mean, it's definitely the case that writing is a great way to build credibility. Essentially, writing is a, a type of portfolio that you can build for yourself. And kind of the act of writing is itself hard, and it gets easier through practice. I think it gets a lot more effective if you're using it for business, if you pay attention to some of the things that Coach Demi trains. Like, be clear about your positioning as a coach, who your target author or target client is, because then that makes your portfolio of writing more clear. When someone sees you on Medium and sees what else you write about, you uh, you look like you want to look like an expert because you only write about that, not someone uh, who dabbles. You don't want to look like a dabbler. So I, we I think we had pushed coaches a lot of times to like focus. It's okay to focus. It's okay to focus. And then this like delightful thing happened on the internet. This personal trainer coach blew up with like the ultimate example of narrow focus. It was a guy that was like sort of helping people with knee pain, and a lot of it was jumping. I mean, sort of you could see a bunch of reasons someone would use them. Maybe they want to dunk a basketball, maybe they want to play, maybe they just don't want knee pain anymore, maybe they have a history of knee injuries, like a bunch of different reasons. But he just narrowed in. He called himself knees over toes guy, and he's just said, I teach something different than anything you've ever heard before about training your knees. And it's just like you couldn't get a more, and the difference is a lot of people teach squats and your knees don't go over your toes. And like, I mean, you couldn't, I just, I mean, I can't even think of any way to get more narrow than that. But that let him break through. I mean, that let him break through and it just says, I have a point of view. And he backed it up. I mean, it's not just having the positioning, he backed it up with a lot of research and explanation. And I think, so, I think I want to recommend Medium is a great place to build that portfolio for yourself. And it really helps if you build it around a focus. Now, yeah, so now we're getting questions. How
Yeah,
do you
I love
differentiate
it. Like,
between gamblers and generalists?
yeah, let's take Liz's question.
Um, I want to reframe this actually, right? It's like um, the how I think your customers are not going to differentiate for the most part. Like that's why we give this advice, right? To specialize. I think if you're a generalist, then maybe writing is not like your ideal, platform, right? Like there's a lot of ways to get customers, and that's you can get it through referrals. I think that's been the number one way that historically coaches grow a business is that they do good coaching and then they get referrals over time. And over the course of a couple of years, you can build up a really good practice if your coaching is strong enough that people recommend you. Um, if you're um, if you're if you're trying to use social media platforms, which Medium is one, long form social media, that uh, just you could be a lot more successful if you focus in. I don't know that the readers will ever particularly be able to differentiate between dabblers and generalists. So it's not impossible that you won't find some clients that way. It's just you should know that you're up against other authors and other coaches, which with a much stronger message.
I would add to that, Liz, that I think podcasts or video shows are
Mm.
a more helpful way um, to explore those topics and to get the nuance. I see your point here about Epstein and range, and I completely agree, and I would say I am one. I
Yeah.
find it really difficult to in some ways I find it difficult to specialize. I think I would submit that I by approaching everything, even leadership coaching through habits, maybe that's how I define my personal specializing is at the root of habits. But I think Liz is making a great
Yeah.
distinction here, and I think both can be true. To succeed in a written world, um, particularly on algorithmic platforms,
Yeah.
specializing can really pay off
Yeah.
to focus in a more human world where we're having conversations or those kinds of things. The more nuanced, broader topics we can
Well,
explore
I
a
think
little
I think
deeper.
it's well, it really clarified for me kind of where Liz's question is coming from. To be a generalist probably makes you a better coach, right? Uh, so we're not talking about sort of the strategy for being the most effective coach. We're talking about strategy for having the most effective marketing. Those things are different. And I think Epstein was writing about um, essentially being effective or beyond that, right? So I, like I find it's helpful at work. I feel like a generalist at work because I've done so many of the pieces of the business like this. Like I've been an editor, I've been a programmer, I've been a writer, I've been I've kept my own books. I've right like I'm not as good at any of those things as some of the people we have in our orbit, but I have a like kind of an excessively generalized skill set for this particular type of company. But when I had to sell myself to be CEO, I didn't talk about the content management systems I built in 2003, right? Like, which is like has some overlap. That's not what I talked about was one thing only. I said I am the ultimate subject matter or like domain expert on Medium. Nobody knows more about Medium than me because I've gone so much deeper. That's the only thing I talked about. People even warned me about overselling myself as a manager. I just said I'm an adequate manager and I'm a great expert on Medium. And and I think that's why they picked me is because there's a lot of people that they could have picked, um, but nobody could say they were number one at understanding how Medium works like I could. And so that's the difference. Is yeah, I mean, being a generalist is super helpful for seeing multiple angles on how to accomplish something. But marketing really, I think, benefits from focus.
And I think if we can reference Ramon's conversation, and really we went an hour and a half with Ramon, and the first 45 minutes, were all about philosophy. And I think Liz, touching on some of this. And then the last half of that conversation was a literal case study in, if you were starting a coaching business, how would you do it?
Yeah.
And as I think back of that conversation, it really almost bifurcates the same way we are here, in that building the foundation and being effective, being well-rounded is hugely valuable. But then when it comes to getting clients and those kinds of marketing conversations, it can be tough to get initial traction without really specializing enough that your people hear your message enough to realize what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good stuff. Good thread. I like the conversation here. Um, so I want to keep it focused on. Oh, I like it. Yeah. So this.
I just screenshot that. I'm still writing a weekly newsletter. I do it weekly now, and I'm always looking for topics. And I think this would be an interesting one. Category design, exactly. Um, I mean, that is, by the way, this phrase category design is the marketing term for how you position yourself so that you're the number one option. It's like you just keep reframing what you do until no one in the world is better at it than you. And I mean, I think probably Ramon might be one of the great teachers of this for coaches. But when I was teaching it, I would say, let's just start with the building you're in right now. Are you the number one coach in your building? Probably. My building has 100 units, so I'm not sure if I am. But once you start thinking that way, then I mean, the theory is it's easier to sell yourself. And yeah, that was my because this is it came up. I mean, just to riff on this a little bit more, this like category design in the C-suite is I have a lot of flaws at like in my resume for to be a CEO of a company of medium size, and like just big holes, a bunch of things I've never done. And here's like maybe the most trivial one, but it's alarming to me, is sometimes people ask me for to put together a slide deck for something, and most executives have put together thousands of slide decks, right? It's just how people communicate in business, right? I think I've made fewer than 20 in my life. Like I'm so bad at communicating this way because I always worked for myself. I never had a period where I was in someone else's company having to do presentations all over the place. And I bet you there's not a single CEO in all of Silicon Valley of a company medium size or bigger who has made fewer slide decks than me. And I was just able to get around all of these holes in my resume because I had done the category design work of being really crystal clear about what I had that nobody else could bring. Yeah.
Good stuff. Thank you for sharing such a, I think, practical and tangible example.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to. There's a question that I've been asked a bit, and selfishly, I think you're the best person to ask. So, coaches, a handful have asked me,
All right.
why should I write on Medium versus writing on my own blog? Like, what's the big deal with writing on Medium if I am going to use writing as a way to sort of demonstrate my expertise?
Yeah, I mean, there's two answers that we hear from the people that actually do it. One is just convenience, right? It's, you know, the setup is easy, the tools are easy, it's really simple to get going. You're running a coaching business, not a WordPress, management business, right? So that's I probably like it starts there for a lot of people, and then but equally is who's going to read your post, right? Medium has distribution built in. There's ways to get your articles in front of other people. That's his own skill set. I mean, you're competing with the other authors at some level. And because our recommendation systems are trying to find the best of what's written and give it to the people that most need to read or most want to read that. But there's really nowhere else in the world where you can get read by people that don't already know you, who are serious readers and serious people. And sometimes I publish other places and like I get told that there's a bunch of page views, but I never hear from any of the people. The quality of reader on Medium is really high, and we'll help share your stuff with them, if if it's good. And that's, I mean, we could spend 10 hours on what that takes. But one of the things that makes something good, coaches have an advantage over everyone else, which is you have real world experience. A lot of people come to Medium. This is kind of a challenge for us, is um, how to make sure that readers don't get swamped by non-experts. A lot of people come to Medium, summarize other things they heard on the internet, and try to package it up as advice. And the reality is they don't know what they're talking about. And so Medium really values people with credibility, and coaches have credibility because you are helping people put advice, into practice. And almost better than anyone two things that I think are really important: what advice works for what type of person, and 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 like how to actually implement it. Uh, so I always found that when a coach took the time to really get deep into a subject, they understood it better than anyone in the world. So that's another reason I think to encourage coaches to write on Medium.
Nice. So Leah's adding
Thank you,
adding
Leah.
her second there. So and we'll
Yeah.
take questions if we get them. But in the absence of questions, I don't get the opportunity to really talk about these things with Tony. So I'm excited. I agree with you on distribution.
Yeah.
I had my own blog and WordPress efficient enough that the first reason um, is maybe even for me. But the second part of distribution and having readers, what are some things? Can you think of anything that comes to mind in terms of do's and don't do's? Again, specifically for coaches, if they are looking to write in a way that could attract people interested in the topics that they're, or are there topics better suited to Medium? Like what is some of the advice you'd give here?
Uh, um, First of all, Leah, can we put this most recent one up from Leah's success story here? Like the Better Humans publication, which I started, is still owned by Coach Dummy, and I think has a very strong invitation to be a place for coaches. There's standards still that are in the style guide there that'll tell you a lot about what that publication is looking for in particular. Um, I would say, though, to succeed on Medium in particular, depth and specificity do well. That the stuff that doesn't do well is more like motivational, like just like sort of a quick like motivational note that you might send to your clients. Just doesn't have the depth, and people don't have the relationship with you for it to land. And so that stuff, I see a lot of that stuff that I think, okay, there's an emotional intelligence behind the piece, but it doesn't get into enough depth, and so they fall flat on Medium. Um, I think that's probably the number one thing. There's You could say that Medium, and like, people ask me about demographics, it skews a little bit technical, and so like technical readers reads self-improvement in a certain way, um they like citations and they like science. Even if you're talking about something more spiritual or woo-woo, they like, kind of the rational explanation in there as well. um I think that you can expect that the reader is kind of coming at everything from a fairly rational and thoughtful perspective. Um, and you kind of have to write for that as well. Um,
Can we talk about
but all
length?
topics, yeah.
Can
A
we talk
length,
about length for a minute? Because I
yeah,
think, um, and I'm curious of your thoughts. I have my own hypothesis, but I had several folks say, "Man, isn't that too isn't that too long?" And I think my best article on Medium is maybe 20,000 words. So I mean, um, a small book, and I think you did that iPhone guide one time that is
you know,
is pretty lengthy. What are your thoughts there?
yeah. Well, I mean, this is more like thematically something I've been talking to a lot of people about is like, what if you just had in your toolbox the a, a tool which is put an unreasonable amount of effort into something. Like, if you feel like you're not succeeding the way that you want, like, why don't we just try one time, like really going way beyond what you think is reasonable in terms of work. And so like 20,000 words for a blog post is a lot. I think the iPhone article that you're referencing of mine is like 75,000 words. It's a 75-minute read. It's definitely book length, and it's way more work than anyone should put into a blog post. Um, but those are the things that are differentiated from the rest of what everyone else is doing. Like, people notice those things. So, like, actually, my business partnership with Medium was in negotiation when I put that iPhone article up, and and it just like sealed the deal, like, because no one had ever written anything like that on Medium, and because I was just like, I differentiated myself, and and I think that that's true too. Like, there's how do they know you're an expert? How do they know that you care? Right? It's because you every now and then you do something that's just unreasonably high quality, and uh, I've seen that pay off so many times. Like, you look at the best articles on Better Humans, that there's this cognitive bias cheat sheet, sort of similar as my iPhone article, and that had like 2 million views. That turned into a book deal for that author, for Buster, who's the author, and got referenced in Medium's like best articles of the last 10 years. And he did it mostly out of um, as a passion project. It was not There was no like obvious payoff for it. So I know we're all busy. We don't have time to work at that level all the time, but every now and then, push yourself to go really, really deep. Also, like, on a more practical level, length does a lot for SEO. So if you want to be the number one result for search terms that are related to your coaching, write definitive long posts on those topics. Even They can be even really narrow topics. Post them on Medium. Medium is actually really good for SEO. Um, yeah, I mean, in general, long is good.
Thank you for delving into that. Um, okay, so Valentina's got another nuanced question. So publishing as a company, so she's a leader within. I'll give you a little bit of background. She's a leader
Yeah,
within a consulting company that serves nonprofits all over Canada in sort of leadership and organizational
sure.
development. So I think where she's coming from is if they're going to post, should they do it individually? Should they do it together? What would be your thoughts there?
uh, for general advice, for this case, I think I might publish as a company. I mean, people like hearing from a person. Sort of a problem then, which is if like what's the turnover? It's like you have these articles that are owned by people that aren't at the company or at the organization anymore. Um, the I've seen people do it multiple ways. I mean, we at Medium, our own blog, we write as people, and uh, it's like here's what I want to get at here. It's safer to write it as from the perspective of the company, but it takes some of the uh, takes away some of the like top end. Like people are more likely to fully engage with a person. So if you're shooting for winners, like if you're really trying to break out, yeah, it's better to hear from an individual person, especially if that person is a subject matter expert. And a lot of nonprofits have people who are top experts in the world. So I see it. I guess what I'm giving pretty muddy advice here. It could go either way. I wouldn't sweat it too much. If you have people that you think could look like experts, have them write it because that will help the articles perform. Um, but if you're just trying to get info out the door, it's completely fine to have have it under a company account.
Good stuff. Thank you. All of this is nuanced. All right, and Ramon, ever the marketer, catching the taglines, inspired by life, supported by science. I dig it. I dig it.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see if any more questions pop up. Are there any? I know you brought back mobile editing, which I think for a lot of folks was a huge deal. Are there any? Um, and getting rid of, I guess, the algorithm, so it's a true follower, true true feed of just the folks that you follow. Are
Well, I mean, just to have the option of that. So I
cool.
mean, the algorithm still exists in a lot of places, but now it is actually an option to have what people call a true follow feed, which I don't know, for some reason we had a feed called following, but then we reorganized it according to what our algorithms thought you wanted to read. And it like I'm always a little suspicious of doing all the work for a human. For humans, like it's like if you let the computers do the work, you lose control over. And I think you always want people to be able to take control. I think they know themselves better. Um, so that was a change. Actually, we are kind of in the middle of, this is related to coaches, is we are in the middle of making changes to our recommendation systems to benefit credibility, which I can't stress enough how credible I find coaches. Um, so I think that people who are like coaches, or academics, or like actually work in a profession and are talking about that profession, they uh, they're going to have perform better than they performed in the past. Where I think a lot of what performs on Medium right now is based on engagement, and so we get a lot of writerly people who don't necessarily have great depth, but they write great headlines and great intros and fairly interesting articles. But our readers want better than merely interesting. They want it to be life changing, and in order to be life changing, you have to hear from people who know what they're talking about. Which, again, coaches I find to be some of the most credible people in the world. Um, right. What is my writing framework? Uh, every writer has to write this article for themselves. This is like Jedi building their own lightsabers. Like you just like this is kind of one of the standard articles. My framework is based around the idea that I have an intuition and like basically a thread that I'm pulling on. So I don't do any upfront analysis, or like I'm not doing a lot of research leading up to the article. I just start writing because it's about pulling together a bunch of ideas that are have already made their way into my head, ideas and information, right? And so I get it out there, and then at the end, it's a surprise to me. What, uh, where did this go? Did this go somewhere interesting? And so sometimes it goes nowhere interesting, and I just delete it, walk away from it. I don't delete it. It sits there and sometimes gets revised years later. Sometimes it goes to interesting places, and then I chop it in. Like I just cut and paste, one of the ideas into a new post. So now I have two posts. Um, but then I'm looking at this draft that's pretty far away from what I'm going to publish, and I'm thinking, who would want to read this? Like, what's the point? That's when I start putting my analytic hat on. And the most concrete thing to say about that is I started thinking about the title, right? And a lot of times the title demands a rewrite. Like, like once you position it, then you have to then look at the content and go, oh, I didn't do enough here. Or I have to make a different case. So that's my process for getting, what I would consider the the full first draft. It's not the final draft, but it's like in the ballpark of exploring what it is that I want to write. Um, and then I do a read through for myself first of all, basically for my ear. Um, uh, eh, Friends of mine, I don't know what readers have said, but like friends of mine say I use a pretty simple language, right? Like I'm not a lot of clauses. These are not long sentences usually, and it's because I'm writing for what just sounds clear to my own ear. And then I do a pass for gaps. Especially I think intuitive people often leave a lot of information in their head when they're writing out. So I'm reading like, did I when I jump from A to B, did I connect the dots? And then I'm reading for Tim Ferriss. I like Tim Ferriss's advice. I'm reading for the haters. So Tim's advice was: first draft is for yourself, second draft is for your fans, third draft is for your haters. It's not so much that there's haters, but especially now that I'm the CEO of Medium, there's like a bunch of constituencies that interpret things differently, and so I'm aware of a couple of them. It's like, um, uh, I mean, first of all, my staff, right? So if I'm talking about a lesson that I learned at work, are they going to interpret it as if I'm like subtweeting them? If I am I, passive aggressively managing them through my newsletter? Then all of our authors, like anything I say that in hints at how their livelihood could change is can be really alarming for them. And then there's subsets of authors like, you know, I love the articles on Medium that change people's lives, like really directly. And I'm like, these are like blunt force articles, I know a lot about, I'm really engaged with. But that means that the poetry community always thinks that, I don't understand them. And it's true, I don't understand them, but I'm not like against them or at odds with them. It just, if I'm going to have a chance to talk about what I know about them, I talk about what I, really know about. So, um, uh, and then if then the last thing is, if I have to edit it myself, like, and it's important, I wait a day and then read it out loud. Like that's where I find the most like grammatical mistakes. Um, so I think, Ramon, that's my system. Um,
I love this question.
I think that I mean, I don't I don't know how this is gonna land, but I mean, it's Kendra. I mean, it's the to be open to other people taking on the vision, to not be, um, and I mean, the obvious one is the CEO transition, and But there was this time when we were doing the certification, the redoing the certification, and I went in thinking I had a ton to offer because I've got a ton of opinions and I've been doing this a long time. And I realized that actually Kendra had heard everything that I'd ever like said and then just run with it. And so, through the act of coaching, more than 1,000 people and working with hundreds of coaches, that this idea of habit coaching, which is my idea, and I think I invented it and saw the potential in it. It was like, it was working on a team, but uh, like it was a lot of those dots were connected to me. I have a lot of pride wrapped up in kind of inventing it, but the person who perfected it is Kendra. And so I pretty quickly in that process, I realized there's like maybe only one thing that I have to offer here that's not that Kendra not going to, necessarily put in herself. And so just having the humility to step back and realize that this thing that I have a lot of pride in, actually someone else does it better now. And I should be grateful for that. And so I think the quality of the certification that we offer is really because, um, not because of my humility, but because Kendra is so good at it, right? And so the best thing I did was just to recognize that and back off of it. And even the CEO transition is kind of similar to that, where it's just realize like, oh, um, there's actually a better CEO for Coach Me than me, and uh, yeah. So I mean, there's a bunch of pride points in there, for me, but uh, that's kind of the direction of it.
Wow. Well, and I want to add that I'm realizing that there's wisdom in the community and in other coaches, and really trying to do the same of aligning, the best at each of the components, and hopefully folks will see
Right.
more of that in the coming months, from us. All right, you mentioned poets on Medium, and Sherry is all there. So
I mean, it sort of gets to what's your expectations. Like I don't see poets on Medium make a full-time living, and I think that's because there's not a big enough poetry community on Medium. But is that a requirement for you to write, right? And this is, are you writing for passion? Which I write for passion all the time. Written some really like niche stuff that's not meant for anyone, right? Except me, basically. And or are you writing for a portfolio? In which case, who cares what my advice is, right? It's like you're putting together a portfolio of your own poetry that you might share with clients or you might put into a book, but the only thing that matters is does the tools help you write it, and Medium's kind of opinion on what should be written is doesn't matter. Uh, I think that's the case probably, um, for it's definitely the case in poetry that uh, I'd rather hear from the poets. Like, how do we get more people who want to read poetry? Not, we just don't. For when the questions are paired with how do I succeed like financially, that's the answer. It's like, well, I mean, I don't know, because I'm not connected to the communities of readers. Um,
all right, we're running short on time, so I think, Ramon, I love that question. We'll get him back or
yeah.
get him to do an article on what's next for Medium. But let's take Valentina's question as we start to wrap up. Tony, what are you most excited about in the next 12 months?
I mean, if Medium gets the basics handled, which we had sort of lost track of those for a while, if we get really our foundation strong again, um, I'm I'm most excited for the way that actually putting credibility front and center. Like, there's it's hard to explain how different Medium would look if we were actually really effective at putting the highest quality articles in front of people. Because when I see the highest quality articles, I'm shocked by who writes on Medium and how much they know and how much they care about the topic they're writing about. And I think that's going to end up being really transformational for us. But then there's all of this like blocking and tackling that we have to do in order to get that stuff in front of our audience. Now, Kendra, I'm really excited to hear how you going to answer this question.
Yeah, it's funny. Yesterday I was revisiting an article and a concept it was that life is like a spiral, that we revisit,
Mm,
or often it can be beneficial to revisit the same topics over again. And so I think, I've spent 3 months in the wilderness, so to speak, of just sort of thinking and learning and exploring what's out there. I knew one piece of our Coach Taught Me elephant really well, but I'm getting to learn the other pieces of the elephant, and I think I'm excited to just revisit what we already have with a
yeah,
with a fresh lens and fresh perspective.
yeah,
My passion for habits has only grown, in that I think that's the right lens to bring about change. My passion
yeah,
for coaching
yeah,
has really only grown. My excitement um, for for coaches, and what they bring to the table. I want to revisit our enterprise coaching, that we had
yeah,
in the past. I think with all that's going on in the world. Liz talked about VUCA and the new term Bonnie. All of the um, just uh, volatility and uncertainty, and adaptability that's required in the world. I think coaches can play an amazing role in helping to
for sure.
support folks through that. And I think enterprise coaching can be a mechanism to do that. I'm excited about revisiting our marketing with tools that are available now.
Yeah,
Even this, and exploring video. I had an audio podcast for a long time,
yeah,
um, but revisiting, revisiting video and what it can be, um, and building on the strengths that you built with SEO, which is something that um,
hmm,
was not in my wheelhouse, but is a strength of the company now, and really leveraging our team. We've got an about us page now, that's up for a while. It's still a bit hidden. It's not on our footer, but you can find it at blog.coach.me. You're going to hear more. You're going to hear more about the team. Um, we've got more team members and roles. I think that will be announced soon. More programs.
yeah.
It's going to be a fun couple of months. Um, and I don't know that anything is really truly new. It's just an
Yeah.
update on strengths that we'd already built.
But I mean, this is exciting to me to hear again the parallels of the value of you having been a part of Coach on Me for so long that you even remember what enterprise coaching was. All of those tools still exist. The lessons are there, but a new CEO who never wasn't part of the company wouldn't have access to those lessons or that opportunity. And since you went through that with us, you know how to bring a fresh take to it. That's really exciting to hear.
Yeah, so I think, for coaches, if you're if you're listening and want to get plugged in, we released the survey. It's open for a few more days to really figure out who are our engaged coaches that want to
Yeah,
participate in the next evolution of enterprise. Tony, you did heavy mental, which is sort of a daily drip. I think
yeah,
we've got a game plan for perhaps how to re-release that. We're working on an accelerator
love it.
program for coaches that really want the support to get to the next level, and then marketing. I think a lot of fun stuff coming, and of course our connection to you and Medium, and I think that's most visible in Discord, in the community there where we get tons of interaction.
That's great. Well, thank
All
you.
right. Appreciate you so much. Appreciate everybody here with your great questions. This was a lot of fun. I love. I want to highlight a few of these. Nathan saying, coach or companies giving their teams access to Coach.me like Headspace. Great point. Ramon, I love these taglines. Proud of our past, committed to our future. I'm digging that. So good stuff. Yeah. Well, audience, thank you so much for being here today and the lively discussion. And Tony, thank you for your time and for letting me, kind of have free reign in getting both sides of your brain.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And, I'm around. Bring me back. I love to be part of these discussions. So thank you, everyone. And yeah, write on Medium. That too. Okay.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.